Thank you very much. Please, have your seats. Dear Prime Minister, members of Cabinet, the head of our joint services, Chief of Staff, Commissioner of Police, Fire Service, Head of Fire Service, Prisons, senior functionaries of our joint services, distinguished members of the diplomatic community, members of the religious community, Dr. Eric Phillips, ladies and gentlemen, in the stillness of this afternoon, there is a particular coolness under a gray and dark gray umbrella of cloud, broken by a beaming soft brightness from what will soon be the setting sun, creating a stark separation between the gloomy tear-bearing clouds on one hand and clear rising clouds with the deep rays of the setting sun on the horizon. This setting created by the Supreme Being conspires together in honor of the pain, sacrifice, brutality, and at the same time, the hope, freedom, inspiration that came from the Demerara Revolt. This bicentennial of the Demerara Slave Revolt is a solemn occasion, a somber reminder that our nation's history involves centuries of heroic resistance and rebellion against the atrocities of colonial rule. We gather here today to commemorate the sacrifices of those slaughtered during the Demerara Revolt of 1823. The callous, cruel, cold-blooded killings of enslaved Africans and the subsequent hangings and beheadings that followed the revolt stand as haunting reminders of the depths of inhumanity that confronted our African ancestors. It also recalls the huge price paid for eventual freedom. The Demerara Revolt began with plantation success on August 18, 1823, and spread along the East Coast. The revolt was the largest in our history, involving about 55 East Coast plantations. The revolt witnessed great restraint on the part of the enslaved Africans. Guyanese historian Dr. Winston McGowan noted, and I quote, "The most remarkable feature of the course of the rebellion was the enslaved hardly offered personal violence to anyone, especially where they met no resistance. They had the opportunity, especially during the initial 2 days of the revolt, to kill most of the white personnel on the plantations, if this had been their desire or intention. Instead, they demonstrated a remarkable degree of restraint, self-control, and humaneness. For the most part, merely seizing them and placing them in stocks without harming them. This restraint, however, attracted a swift, brutal, and excessively deadly response from the colonial authorities. Martial law was declared. A formidable military force was assembled and unleashed upon those involved in the revolt. The revolt turned into a bloodbath. A massacre unfolded at Bachelor's Adventure, where the mostly defenseless Africans were ruthlessly gunned down. More than 200 Africans were slaughtered. Their bodies sprawled in the cotton fields and on the roadside. This slaughter ended the revolt. Other acts of reprisals for the revolt followed just as swiftly. Summary executions took place on some plantations, as is recorded in the ensuing 5 months following the revolt. 72 persons faced trials. 51 were sentenced to death, of which 33 were executed, including 10 who were decapitated, their heads hung on poles along the roadside. The sacrifice of the martyrs of the Demra revolt was not in vain. The revolt helped tip the scales of history in favor of freedom. The echoes of the revolt and its brutal suppression reached the British Parliament. This triggered reforms which eventually led to first apprenticeship and then to the formal abolition of slavery in 1838. The history of the 1823 Demra revolt is now part of our history. It is part of our history, who we are as Guyanese, who we are as a nation. This history is part of all of us. The history of a free and independent Guyana, the sacrifices of those who fell during the revolt, contributed to our eventual liberation, first from slavery and then from colonial rule. I've recapped in summary form the events of the revolt because I want our young people especially, who often assemble on the fringes and even within the precincts of this monument on weekends, to appreciate the significance of the Demra revolt. This monument must not be misused or abused by activities which take place in and around it. This monument stands as a memorial to those who give their lives for our freedom, and therefore the grounds on which it is situated are considered as hallowed. A grateful nation must never forget those who paid the ultimate sacrifice in the pursuit of freedom. Today, we salute the indomitable spirit of those who dared to lift the forbidden banner of freedom. Their struggles and sacrifices paved the path towards freedom. That freedom was not a privilege that was handed down, but which was earned through the blood, sweat, and exertions of our ancestors. It is a freedom we must never take for granted, and which we must zealously guard from the enemies within and outside of our borders. The protection and preservation of democracy must be a shield to safeguard our nation's freedom. Democracy is a vessel through which the voice of the people finds expression. The seeds of freedom flourish in the fertile soils of democracy, nurtured by respect for human rights and civil liberties. In turn, the tree of freedom provides shade to democracy, supporting an environment in which diverse perspectives can thrive. Dissent can be voiced without fear, and the people's choices are respected.